Emily Carter stood motionless in the center of the mat, the sharp sting of the takedown still fresh in her ribs. All around her, the students of Ironclad Jiu-Jitsu Academy erupted in laughter, their amusement echoing off the padded walls. Ryan Blake, the academy's head instructor, towered over her with a smirk, tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Ladies like you belong in spin class, not on my mat," he said mockingly, brushing his black belt as if it were a badge of invincibility. Phones were already out, capturing her humiliation frame by frame. She didn't flinch. Her hands calloused and steady braced against the mat as she rose with quiet dignity. Her gaze briefly locked with Ryan's, not with anger, but with something far more unsettling calm. As she straightened her GI, a small military dog tag slipped from beneath the collar, catching the light before she tucked it back out of view. It was a moment so brief that most missed it entirely, but for those who noticed it, hinted at a history far deeper than anyone suspected. Ryan turned to the class, puffing his chest with authority. "This is why fundamentals matter," he declared. "Some people just aren't built for this." The students chuckled again, a mix of pity and mockery dancing in their eyes. Emily didn't respond. She simply returned to the line, her steps measured and graceful. Her silence was not submission, it was restraint. What the academy saw was an average middle-aged woman with no business being on the same mat as competitive fighters. But what they missed entirely was the patience in her eyes, the posture of someone used to absorbing discomfort, and the focus of a mind that had learned to survive in environments far harsher than a training gym. They didn't see the Marine in her, they only saw the meekness. But that moment, the takedown, the laughter, the sneer became the spark. Beneath the surface of her calm, something shifted. Emily Carter had walked into Ironclad for peace, for discipline, for healing. What she found instead was a challenge that reawakened a fire she thought she had buried. It wasn't pride that stirred within her, but purpose. That purpose would lead her down a path that no one at Ironclad could have imagined. The woman they mocked would not stay in the shadows for long. In a place built on hierarchy belts and bravado, Emily was about to redefine what strength looked like, and it started with humiliation that would become legend. In a small third-floor walk-up in Boston's Dorchester neighborhood, Emily Carter began each day the same way, with silence. Before the sun rose, she would sit by her kitchen window, hands wrapped around a steaming mug of black coffee, watching the city gradually stir to life. The apartment was modest, 2 rooms, a second-hand couch, and a bookshelf filled with old medical journals and military biographies. It was enough for her. She never wanted more than peace. Her mornings were structured with almost military precision. Years of service had made routine a sanctuary. After coffee, she laced up her work shoes, packed her bag, and made the quiet commute to the Veterans Rehabilitation Center in Jamaica Plain. There she worked as a physical therapist, helping others heal the same kinds of wounds. She rarely spoke about wounds that were often more invisible than physical. To her colleagues, Emily was competent, focused, and reserved. She connected with veterans in a way no one else did, understanding their pain with a quiet empathy that required no explanation. Most of them didn't know her history. She never volunteered it. They assumed she was just a civilian with a heart for service, not someone who had once led hand-to-hand combat drills for elite Marine units overseas. But at night, when the clinic closed and the lights dimmed, Emily's silence deepened. She rarely went out. Her social circle was almost non-existent. The few photos in her home were of her father, a former Marine himself, whose dog tags now rested on a chain around her neck. She touched them often when stress crept in, more a gesture of grounding than sentimentality. They were a link to someone who had understood discipline, sacrifice, and the cost of honor. Her military discharge had come after a roadside bomb shattered her right shoulder in Afghanistan. Though the doctors said she was lucky, the scar that ran from her collarbone to her bicep told a different story. Her injury ended her career, but the deeper wound was the loss of purpose. Her marriage collapsed soon after. Kyle, her ex-husband, had grown tired of the late-night panic attacks, the financial strain, and the way she never seemed to truly be present. He left with a sigh, saying, "You need to figure out who you are now." She wasn't sure she ever had, and yet through the stillness, Emily rebuilt a life. Not loud or flashy, but solid. She gave her strength to others, even if no one gave her credit. She asked for nothing. But deep down, the part of her that had thrived in the crucible of combat remained coiled and watchful, waiting for a reason to rise again. It was a former patient who first mentioned Ironclad Jiu-Jitsu Academy. A young veteran recovering from a back injury told Emily how training had helped him cope with PTSD and rebuild confidence. Intrigued, Emily researched the academy and was surprised to find it nearby, housed in a sleek, repurposed warehouse in the upscale part of town. The membership fees made her hesitate, but something in her stirred. She saw it not as luxury, but as therapy. From the moment she walked into Ironclad, she was met with skepticism. Ryan Blake, the academy's head coach and a former regional MMA fighter, gave her a once-over and nearly smirked. "We do have some beginner classes. This isn't cardio kickboxing, though," he said, barely disguising his condescension. Emily didn't argue. She nodded, signed the forms, paid the fee, and quietly took her place on the mat. She didn't try to stand out. She arrived early, trained quietly, and left without lingering. But the discipline never left her. Her body remembered more than she expected. Leverage, balance, pressure points. These were second nature. While others flailed through basic drills, Emily executed them with eerie precision. Still, she downplayed her progress. It was safer to be underestimated. But Ryan noticed, and so did a few of the others. It wasn't just her technique, it was her posture, her presence, the way she never flinched, never whined, and never seemed surprised by pain. What they didn't know was that Emily had been tested in fire. Compared to war zones and field hospitals, a sweaty gym with blue mats was almost a sanctuary. Still, Emily felt the tension build. Ryan didn't like losing control of the narrative. He thrived on dominance, on being the alpha. And something about Emily's quiet competence threatened that. She wasn't challenging him, but her very existence as someone who didn't bow to his ego irritated him. So when the opportunity came to embarrass her during a demonstration, Ryan took it. That sweeping takedown wasn't about instruction, it was a statement, a reminder of hierarchy. But he didn't know what he had awakened. In that moment, he mistook humility for weakness. What he didn't realize was that Emily Carter hadn't joined Ironclad to compete with others. She had joined to reclaim herself, and she was just getting started. From the moment Emily began showing signs of real competence on the mat, the tone at Ironclad Academy shifted. What started as subtle side glances and dismissive smirks evolved into something more overt. Ryan Blake, whose authority rested on unchallenged dominance, saw Emily as a threat to his control, even if she never intended to challenge him. With the silent complicity of several students, he launched a campaign to undermine her presence. Megan, one of the more popular students in the women's advanced class, led the charge among the younger crowd. Her whisper-thin comments often came with just enough volume to be heard by Emily. "That's what happens when soccer moms get bored," or "she's just here for attention." In class, Ryan began skipping over Emily when assigning partners, instead choosing to pair her with beginners or simply leaving her to observe from the sidelines. "Why don't you sit this one out and take notes?" he'd say, his voice oozing false sympathy, but his eyes sharp with control. Others took his lead, avoiding eye contact, avoiding conversation. When sparring rounds began and students formed circles and teams, Emily was left standing alone. She'd nod, quietly retreat to the edge of the mat and observe just as she'd done in combat zones, watching, learning, calculating. The message became crystal clear the afternoon. Ryan tossed her a spray bottle and towel. "Since you're not using the mats properly, might as well clean them," he said, not even bothering to make eye contact. The students laughed. No one offered to help. No one questioned it. Emily knelt and wiped the sweat-soaked vinyl in silence, every motion a meditation in discipline, not defeat. She was no stranger to hard work, but the intent behind this gesture wasn't about cleanliness. It was a calculated effort to break her spirit. Beyond the academy, the humiliation followed her like a shadow. The clip of Ryan sweeping her to the mat, complete with snide commentary, made its way online. It was shared by students as a joke passed around in group chats and reposted in training forums. Emily had never asked for visibility, but now she had it for all the wrong reasons. At her workplace, she caught co-workers giving her sideways looks. Conversations fell silent when she entered break rooms. She heard a patient request a different therapist after seeing the video calling her unstable. Then there was the message from Kyle. Her ex-husband had always viewed her strength as a threat, even in their marriage. Seeing the clip gave him a twisted sense of validation. "This is why I couldn't stay," he wrote, always trying to prove something, never knowing when to quit. Emily read it once. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. It wasn't worth dragging her pain back into dialogue with someone who had never tried to understand it in the first place. Despite everything, Emily didn't quit. Not when they isolated her, not when they mocked her, and not when they tried to erase her. She returned to Ironclad with the same quiet focus, the same exact posture, the same calm breath. Every insult, every exclusion, every cruel laugh was just another layer she filed away. She had endured much worse. What none of them realized was that they were giving her exactly what she needed: clarity. And clarity in the hands of someone like Emily Carter was more powerful than any belt or title could ever offer. It was a chance meeting at the VA hospital that changed the trajectory of Emily's journey. After finishing a late shift, she passed through the lobby where a grizzled man in his 60s sat quietly with a therapy band strapped to his leg. He noticed her immediately, the upright posture, the scanning eyes, the way she carried herself, even in civilian clothes. "Marine?" he asked, though he already knew. Emily nodded. "Staff Sergeant Emily Carter." The man reached out his hand, his grip firm. "Master Sergeant Daniel Brooks. I've seen you at Ironclad. You're wasting your time there." Daniel Brooks had served 25 years in the Corps, decorated, feared, respected. He knew the difference between real warriors and showmen in GIs. After hearing about Emily's treatment, he invited her to train with a small group of veterans at the Dorchester Community Center. "We don't have state-of-the-art mats or fancy mirrors," he warned, "but what we do have is respect. Real training. Real people." You in Emily didn't hesitate. She showed up the next evening just before dusk, ready to rebuild the part of herself Ironclad had tried to erase. Training with Daniel was like coming home. There were no drills for Instagram, no theatrics for applause. It was about control, efficiency, humility. Under his guidance, Emily grew stronger, not just physically, but tactically. He taught her how to refine what she already knew, how to use her opponent's overconfidence against them, how to adapt under pressure and when to strike. "You're not a student," he said one night. "You're a weapon with the safety on. Stop waiting for permission." While Ryan Blake ridiculed her for practicing incorrect techniques, Emily was learning elite-level counterattacks and submissions from one of the Corps' most respected instructors. She kept it quiet, never bragged, never hinted. She trained at night in silence and returned to Ironclad during the day with the same underwhelming presence. She let Ryan believe she was struggling. She let Megan continue her whispers. Every insult sharpened her blade. Daniel knew she was holding back, but he didn't push her. He only reminded her that every warrior must eventually step into the light. "You're not here to prove anything to anyone," he said, "but there comes a moment when silence becomes strategy, and after that, it becomes surrender. You don't owe them the truth, but you owe yourself the chance to stand in it." Emily understood. She wasn't afraid of exposure. She was waiting for the right time, and that time was fast approaching. The Boston Open Jiu-Jitsu tournament loomed ahead, a regional competition where reputations were made and broken. Emily signed up quietly, registering under her full name and rank. When she submitted the form, Daniel smiled. "Good," he said. "You're not stepping into that ring to fight them. You're stepping in to reclaim yourself." And so the quiet woman with the military dog tags around her neck began preparing for the moment that would shift everything, not for revenge, but for clarity. And when the world saw what she'd become, there would be no looking away. The Boston Open Jiu-Jitsu tournament was more than just a competition. It was a proving ground. Competitors came from all over the region, wearing their academy names like armor. Emily Carter registered quietly, her application backed by the formal endorsement of Master Sergeant Daniel Brooks, who signed as her sponsor and verified her credentials, though she was still technically listed as a white belt at Ironclad. Daniel's ranking and recognition overrode that. Emily didn't seek to win glory. She sought to reclaim what others had tried to strip away her dignity. When Ryan Blake discovered her name on the registration list, his outrage was immediate and theatrical. In front of the entire advanced class, he scoffed, "Are you trying to embarrass yourself and this academy?" Emily remained calm. "I'd just like to test my skills, sir," she replied evenly. Ryan's face reddened. His pride pricked in front of his loyal circle. He attempted to withdraw her entry by calling the organizers, insisting she was unqualified. But it was too late. The rules allowed any registered fighter with a valid sponsor to compete even if their home academy disapproved. As the tournament brackets were announced, fate intervened with poetic precision. A last-minute medical withdrawal in the elite division created an unexpected vacancy. Emily, listed as an alternate, was promoted to fill the slot by rule. When her name appeared on the official bracket, matched against none other than Ryan Blake himself, the tension rippled through the venue like an electric shock. Ryan rushed to the officials' table demanding a correction, but the tournament director stood firm. "You brought her here. She stays." The crowd gathered fast, drawn by the buzz of the unusual matchup. Rumors spread quickly: the black belt coach versus the soccer mom. Cameras were ready. Spectators leaned forward. On the mat, Ryan smirked confidently, circling like a predator. Emily bowed respectfully, her dog tags tucked beneath her GI. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The referee gave the signal, and the match began. Ryan charged, expecting fear. What he met instead was precision. In a single fluid motion, Emily slipped past his guard, trapped his sleeve, and executed a textbook-perfect arm drag. Within seconds, she transitioned to a controlled armbar. The crowd went silent as Ryan's face contorted in panic. He tapped. The match was over. 14 seconds. Just 14 seconds. Emily stood composed as the referee raised her hand. A stunned silence blanketed the room before erupting into murmurs and gasps. Ryan didn't offer a handshake. He stormed off the mat, red-faced and defeated. Emily bowed once more before walking off with quiet grace. Daniel Brooks was waiting, pride in his eyes. "Clean execution," he said, offering his hand. "Your father would be proud." Emily simply nodded, her dog tags cold against her chest. The woman they laughed at had just rewritten the narrative forever. By the next morning, the video of Emily's 14-second victory had already gone viral. Dozens of angles, slow-motion replays, and shocked commentary circulated across martial arts forums and social media platforms. But it wasn't just the speed of the match that captivated viewers. It was the backstory. A quiet woman mocked and dismissed, rising to face her oppressor and winning with effortless precision. Emily became an icon overnight, not of aggression, but of quiet power. With attention came scrutiny. Former students from Ironclad began coming forward, sharing stories of Ryan's bullying, favoritism, and psychological manipulation. Several women spoke about being sidelined, criticized, or publicly humiliated for not fitting his mold. The tournament match had pulled the curtain back on something deeper, a pattern of abuse cloaked in discipline. The martial arts community, once silent, started asking hard questions. Ironclad's owner, Jacob Sterling, tried to save face. A businessman first and martial artist second, he suspended Ryan pending investigation, released a carefully worded statement about inclusivity and student respect, and tried to shift the narrative. He reached out to Emily, privately offering an apology and a new role at the Academy Women's Program, lead full creative control, and a marketing campaign built around her story. But Emily declined. She had no interest in becoming their redemption arc. "You didn't believe in me when it mattered," she said plainly. "I'm not your brand. I'm moving forward." She submitted her formal resignation from Ironclad and requested a refund for her most recent tuition. Jacob didn't argue. He knew the Academy's reputation was already hanging by a thread. What surprised Emily most was how many students stayed silent. Some avoided her entirely. A few offered awkward nods of respect. Megan, once the loudest critic, was conspicuously absent. But Emily wasn't interested in vengeance. She had reclaimed her self-worth. That was enough. As she walked away from Ironclad for the last time, it wasn't with bitterness, it was with clarity. And in that clarity, Emily saw her path forward, not as a competitor, but as a guide for others like her. The match had ended in 14 seconds, but the impact had only just begun. Weeks after the tournament, Emily returned to her routines at the Veterans Rehabilitation Center, but something within her had shifted. The story of her match had reached more veterans than she expected, and some began to ask if she could train them privately. One night, while clearing out equipment in the back room of the center, she had an idea, a program that combined martial arts fundamentals with trauma-informed therapy for those recovering from combat injury or abuse. With Daniel's help and the center's quiet approval, she launched evening classes twice a week. Word spread quickly. Veterans, many struggling silently, came seeking not just technique, but healing. Emily's classes weren't about belts or accolades. They were about breath control recentering. They were about reclaiming power internally, not externally. She taught with calm clarity, wearing her dog tags over her GI, now a visible anchor to her mission. One night, Megan arrived at the edge of class, standing awkwardly by the door. Her posture lacked the arrogance she once carried. After class ended, she approached Emily. "I came to apologize," she said. "I was wrong about you, about a lot of things." Emily studied her for a long moment, then offered a quiet nod. "We all make judgments," she replied. "What matters is if we're willing to change them when we learn better." Megan asked to volunteer, hoping to understand the work, maybe contribute. Emily welcomed her on one condition, that she respected the boundaries of the students and committed to learning their needs first. Over the next months, Megan transformed. What began as discomfort turned into genuine service. She later enrolled in a physical therapy program, inspired by the very woman she had once mocked. Meanwhile, the investigation into Ryan Blake deepened. More former students came forward. His suspension became permanent. His name was quietly removed from several competition boards. While he retained his black belt, technically, his standing in the community collapsed. He had become a cautionary tale, not just of abuse, but of arrogance unchecked. Emily, on the other hand, had become a beacon, not because she fought back, but because she built something better in the aftermath. Where others tore down, she chose to lift. The small class in the back of the rehab center grew. Donations from local businesses trickled in. Then came attention from veteran non-profits, trauma recovery foundations, and even state wellness programs. Within 6 months, Emily's curriculum had expanded to 3 centers across Boston with a waiting list of participants. She worked full-time still, but adjusted her hours. Purpose had momentum, and she was ready. The classes blended gentle conditioning with self-defense breathwork and trust exercises. Every movement came with meaning. Every repetition was a mirror, helping students reconnect to their own control. Emily never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Her presence grounded the room. Her students called her Coach Carter, a nickname that made her smile. One morning after a session, a stranger approached her holding an old photograph. "You're Robert Carter's daughter, aren't you?" he asked. His name was Walter Hughes, an aging veteran with a slow gait and deep eyes. "Your father saved my life in Lebanon. He never talked about it, but I never forgot." Emily invited him in for coffee. They sat beneath the framed photo of her father that now hung in the studio. "He had that same quiet about him," Walter said. "He never needed to be the loudest, but when it mattered, he showed up, just like you." Emily nodded, tears rising behind her calm. "I'm just trying to live the way he taught me," she whispered. Walter smiled. "You're doing more than that. You're multiplying it." Those moments became the true rewards. Not the viral clips, not the articles that now occasionally named her in lists of community leaders. It was the slow building of something real, something that would outlast both applause and criticism. Emily was no longer surviving. She was leading. The footage of Emily's 14-second victory over Ryan Blake was played, shared, slowed down, and studied like a phenomenon. Her students asked about it often. "Is it true you beat your coach in 14 seconds?" They'd whisper in awe. She would nod softly, but always followed with the same response. It wasn't the move. It was the preparation, the stillness, the discipline. In class, she referred to it jokingly as the 14-second solution, but always tempered it with reflection. A quick win doesn't mean much without the years that led to it, she'd say. Strength isn't flash. It's what's left when everything else is stripped away. And her students believed her not because she demanded it, but because she embodied it. She taught them that true power was quiet, that endurance wasn't about never being knocked down, but about standing up again without needing applause. She taught them that the most powerful things in life don't shout, they move with quiet precision and undeniable impact. Just like her. The dog tags that once hung hidden beneath her collar now swung openly during class. They were no longer just her father's, they were hers. A symbol of legacy, of service, of rebuilding, of being underestimated and still choosing to rise. Her students often touched them reverently, asking about the Marine they once belonged to. She'd smile and say, "He taught me the mission matters more than the noise." As the program grew, other cities began reaching out wanting to adopt her model, but Emily didn't rush. Impact, she said to her staff one day, isn't about how far we go, it's about how deeply we serve where we stand. In the end, her greatest legacy wasn't in defeating Ryan Blake, it was in teaching a generation that true strength lives not in victory, but in quiet, relentless courage. If Emily's story has stayed with you, if it reminded you of moments when you were counted out, overlooked, or underestimated, then maybe it's time to look at your own strength a little differently. Because true resilience doesn't shout. It doesn't ask for permission. It rises quietly but surely until it can't be ignored. And if this story stirred something in you, don't let it end here. Give it a voice by liking this video, sharing it with someone who needs to remember who they are, or leaving a comment about a time when you found your power in the silence. Most of all, join us on this journey. Subscribe to the channel, and every week we'll bring you stories that honor the quiet fighters, the ones who don't always make noise, but always make a difference.